The ringing in my ears drowned out everything else as my sister's words hung in the air. "Emma's just not cut out for this kind of work," she said, her voice carrying across the gallery to where I sat hunched over my sketchbook. My pencil snapped between my fingers, graphite shattering across the page of carefully detailed illustrations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I have saved something extra special for you. She's too unconventional, too emotional. Look at her. She can barely focus on commercial appeal. My mother nodded, sliding another check across the table to my sister Vanessa, who had just secured another exhibition space for her gallery, somehow always the family's artistic visionary. The check, $50,000 for gallery expansion, came into focus as my vision narrowed to a pinpoint, the same amount I'd been denied for my studio rental application last month. "Vanessa has that natural curator's eye," my mother said. "That's what you need in the art world." "My name is Emma. I'm 35 and my paintings now sell for 6 figures. This is the story of how I reclaimed my artistic voice, despite the family that tried to silence it. I'd applied to every prestigious art program I could find: Guggenheim Fellowship, MacArthur Grant, Artist in Residence at MoMA. Each application was a secret I kept from family brunches, where they debated whether I'd make it through another year of dabbling, or if I should just find a commercial design job and settle for mediocrity. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, champagne already in hand at 11 a.m. Besides, Emma's got that whole tortured artist thing going on, always obsessing about some abstract concept. You can't be marketable if you're creating work no one understands. "That's exactly right," my father agreed, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal glass that cost more than my art supplies for a month. "This family's got a reputation to maintain in the art world. We don't need," he gestured vaguely in my direction, "experimental nonsense associated with our name." The experimental nonsense he was referring to was my series exploring human vulnerability through abstract expressionism, work that critics had actually begun noticing in small independent galleries. Work that questioned the commercialization of art that my family's gallery empire was built upon. Work that dared to suggest that art could be more than just decoration for wealthy collectors' walls. I'd stopped showing them my portfolio after Vanessa pulled me aside and explained very gently that my presence at her gallery openings could, quote, confuse the brand message. Family businesses require family alignment. "Emma, you understand that, right?" I understood perfectly. I also understood that every grant and residency I'd applied to had waitlisted me pending professional references I couldn't provide without subjecting my work to the dismissive critique of my family's commercial standards. Something shifted inside me as I watched them laugh, planning Vanessa's fall exhibition while dismissing my summer of intensive creation. The strange metallic taste in my mouth wasn't just rage, it was resolve crystallizing into something harder, something they'd never see coming. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood with a sound that made them all turn. "I need some air," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Don't be so sensitive," my mother called after me. "We're just being realistic about your prospects." Outside, the cool morning air did nothing to calm the fire spreading through my chest. My phone vibrated. A reply to an application I'd submitted months ago through an obscure gallery known for launching unconventional artists. "Miss Prescott, we'd like to discuss your submission, Vulnerabilities in Cerulean. Please call this number immediately." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I looked back at the house where my family continued their brunch, continued planning which artists to represent next, which trends to follow, which creative voices were marketable. I made the call. "This is Emma Prescott. I believe you contacted me about my series on vulnerability." "Ms. Prescott, this is Julian Meyer from Labyrinth Gallery. Your work is unlike anything we've seen. Raw, powerful, uncompromising. We'd like to offer you a 6-month residency to develop your series for a solo exhibition." The words hit me like a physical force. A solo exhibition. A chance to create without my family's critical voices drowning out my own. A way to prove that art didn't have to follow their commercial formula to have value. There's one more thing, Julian continued. The residency is in Berlin. You'd need to relocate next month. Berlin, over 6,000 miles from my family's suffocating presence. 6,000 miles to develop my voice without their constant reminders of my inadequacies. 6,000 miles to become the artist I knew I could be. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. I didn't tell my family where I was going. I let them believe I was taking time to find myself after another creative failure. Let them shake their heads sadly when people asked about Eleanor Prescott's daughter, who couldn't find her artistic direction. The gallery had arranged everything: housing, studio space, materials, even a modest stipend that would allow me to create without financial pressure for the first time in my life. My monthly social media posts, carefully curated to show only tourist attractions and cafe visits, kept the family updated just enough to maintain the illusion that I was simply traveling, not creating the most important work of my life. It was easier than explaining why I couldn't share my process with them, why I'd needed to completely disappear from their world to do what needed to be done. The truth was, I'd been selected specifically because of the raw emotional honesty in my work, not despite it. Labyrinth Gallery specialized in discovering artists whose voices challenged conventional aesthetic expectations, whose work made viewers uncomfortable, in ways that prompted genuine emotional response rather than mere appreciation. Berlin's vibrant art scene embraced me in ways my family never had. Here, my tendency to work through the night, to lose myself in the creative process, to prioritize emotional resonance over commercial appeal, all the qualities my family had criticized, were celebrated as dedication to authentic artistic expression. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who understood that true art comes from vulnerability, not calculation. My studio became my sanctuary. A converted warehouse in a formerly industrial district, it had soaring ceilings, massive windows that let in northern light, and enough space to work on multiple large canvases simultaneously. I covered the walls with sketches, photographs, color studies, creating an immersive environment that reflected the internal landscape I was trying to externalize. The work poured out of me. Free from my family's judgmental gaze, I created with an intensity that surprised even me. My Vulnerabilities series evolved, deepened, became more nuanced as I explored not just human fragility, but also resilience, the beauty in brokenness, the strength found in acknowledging weakness. Julian visited monthly, watching the progression with growing excitement. "This is extraordinary, Emma," he said during his third visit, standing before a massive canvas dominated by fractured forms in shades of blue and gold. "You're creating something genuinely new here. You think people will connect with it?" I asked, the ghost of my family's criticism still haunting me despite the distance. "I think people will be transformed by it," he replied. "Art this honest doesn't just connect, it resonates. It changes people." 4 months into my residency, Julian brought news that sent my heart racing. "The director of the Biennale saw your progress photos. They want to include 3 pieces in this year's exhibition." The Berlin Biennale, one of the most prestigious contemporary art showcases in the world. Artists spent decades trying to get noticed by its curators, and they wanted my work. Work my family would have dismissed as uncommercial, too emotional, too raw. I worked feverishly to complete the selected pieces, losing track of days and nights, eating only when Julian's assistant brought food and insisted I take breaks. When the installation was complete, and I stood in the massive exhibition hall seeing my canvases among works by artists I had studied and admired for years, something inside me shifted permanently. This wasn't just validation. It was transformation. I was no longer Emma Prescott, the disappointing daughter who couldn't meet her family's artistic standards. I was Emma Prescott, artist, selected for the Berlin Biennale, creator of work that made people stop and stare in wonder. Opening night was electric. Critics, collectors, gallery owners from around the world filled the space, and to my astonishment, a crowd consistently gathered around my installation. I stood slightly apart, anonymous in the elegant black dress Julian had insisted I wear, listening to strangers discuss my work with intensity and admiration. The emotional depth is staggering, one woman said, her accent British, her clothing screaming old money and sophisticated taste. It's like looking directly into someone's soul. The technique is masterful, her companion agreed. The way she layers transparency with these bold strokes. It's revolutionary. Who is this artist? I've never seen her work before. Julian appeared at my side, champagne flutes in hand. They're talking about you, he murmured, passing me a glass. And they're not the only ones. The Guggenheim curator has asked to meet you, and there are 3 collectors who want to discuss commissions. I took a sip, the bubbles catching in my throat. This doesn't feel real. It gets better, Julian said, his eyes gleaming. That woman who can't stop looking at, Fracture in Blue? She's Elise Montgomery. Elise Montgomery, the most influential collector of contemporary art in Europe. Her endorsement could launch careers overnight. She wants to buy it. She's offering 180,000 euros. The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. 180,000 euros? For my painting? Julian nodded, grinning. I told her we'd need to discuss it with you. But Emma, this is just the beginning. The critical response is overwhelming. By tomorrow, everyone in the art world will be talking about you. He was right. By the following morning, my installation had been featured in articles by 3 major art publications. By the end of the week, all 3 Biennale pieces had sold for sums that made me dizzy. By the end of the month, I had commission requests that would keep me working for 2 years. And Julian was negotiating a permanent representation agreement that would give me complete creative freedom with the full support of Labyrinth Gallery's international connections. 6 months after the Biennale, as I was preparing for my first solo exhibition at Labyrinth's main gallery in New York, Julian brought up the question I'd been avoiding. Your family, he said carefully, arranging slides of my newest works on the light table. They own Prescott Galleries, correct? 4 locations, major influence in commercial art markets? I nodded, focusing intently on the canvas before me rather than meeting his eyes. They haven't contacted you about your success? The Prescott name is well known. Surely they've heard. I laid down my brush, wiping my hands on a rag stained with 100 colors. They don't follow the kind of publications that would cover my work. Contemporary abstract expressionism isn't exactly their market. Emma, Julian said gently, you're being featured in Art Forum next month. Your Biennale pieces were covered in the New York Times Arts section. You've sold work to some of the most prominent collectors in the world. This goes beyond specialized publications. I knew he was right. My family's silence wasn't from ignorance. It was deliberate. They knew exactly what had happened in Berlin, knew about the Biennale, knew about the sales and the critical acclaim. They were choosing not to acknowledge it because doing so would mean admitting they had been catastrophically wrong about me and my work. What if, Julian said, choosing his words carefully, we offered your sister's gallery first right of refusal on hosting your New York exhibition? I stared at him. You want to show my work at Prescott Gallery? After everything. I want to give you the opportunity to triumph completely. He interrupted. Your work deserves to be seen by everyone, including the people who didn't believe in it, including your family. The thought of my canvases hanging on the walls where I had been told I didn't belong created a complicated knot of emotions in my chest: vindication and anxiety, excitement and dread. Think about it, Julian said, squeezing my shoulder gently. The offer to Prescott Gallery would come from me as your representative. You wouldn't have to engage directly until you were ready. I thought about it for 3 days, weighing the emotional cost against the symbolic victory. On the 3rd day, I called Julian. Make the offer, I said. But don't tell them I'm involved in the decision. Let them think it's purely business. Julian's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. He approached Vanessa's gallery not as my representative, but as the director of Labyrinth Gallery, offering a partnership to host the American debut of, quote, the Berlin sensation, whose work had commanded 6-figure sums at the Biennale. He didn't mention my name, referring only to, quote, our resident artist, whose identity would be revealed at the opening. The exhibition terms were generous, but required the gallery to commit without knowing the artist's identity. A gamble, but one that any gallery with business sense would take given the documented sales figures and critical acclaim Julian presented. Vanessa, ever the shrewd businesswoman, accepted the terms within 24 hours of receiving the proposal. The contract was signed 2 days later. My sister had just agreed to host my triumphant return to the art world that had once rejected me, without having any idea she was doing so. The preparations were exhausting but exhilarating. Creating new work for the exhibition while maintaining the secrecy around my identity required careful coordination. Julian handled all communications with Prescott Gallery, insisting that the artist's privacy was paramount until the opening. I worked feverishly in a temporary studio in Brooklyn, producing 7 new large-scale works that built upon the success of the Biennale series while pushing into new emotional territory. As the opening approached, anticipation in the art world built to a fever pitch. The mysterious Berlin sensation was the subject of intense speculation. Critics who had seen my work in Germany published tantalizing previews. Collectors placed blind bids on pieces they hadn't yet seen. The exclusivity and mystery had created exactly the kind of buzz that Vanessa's commercial instincts would appreciate, though for entirely different reasons than she imagined. The morning of the opening, I stood in my Brooklyn apartment staring at the dress I'd chosen for the evening, a structured black gown with architectural elements that echoed the geometric patterns in my newest works. Tonight I would stand in the gallery that had rejected me and watch as the art world celebrated exactly what my family had dismissed as worthless. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Vanessa just did a walkthrough. She's absolutely stunned by the work. Said it's the most important exhibition Prescott Gallery has ever hosted. Still has no idea it's yours. Are you ready for tonight? I took a deep breath, looking at my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was not the same person who had fled to Berlin a year ago, with nothing but wounded pride and stubborn determination. This woman stood tall, confident in her artistic vision and her right to occupy space in the world. I'm ready, I texted back, and for the first time in my life, I truly was. The Berlin artist residency was everything my family thought I was too mediocre to handle. 6 months of intensive creation, technical exploration, and artistic evolution. I thrived in ways they could never have imagined, pushing boundaries they didn't even know existed. My family thought I was finding myself through aimless travel. I'd let them believe it. Let them spread stories about my lack of direction and artistic vision. Let them shake their heads sadly when people asked about Eleanor Prescott's daughter, who couldn't find her place in the art world. The gallery had arranged for a social media consultant to manage my public presence, carefully curating posts that showed tourist attractions and cafe visits without revealing my true purpose in Berlin. My monthly updates, actually written by Labyrinth Gallery's PR team, kept the family believing I was simply traveling while sorting myself out. It was easier than explaining why I couldn't share my work with them, why I'd needed to completely disappear from their world to do what needed to be done. The truth was, I'd been recruited specifically because of my artistic vision, not despite it. Julian had seen something in my Vulnerabilities series that my family had been blind to. An authentic voice that challenged conventional aesthetics, that dared to confront viewers with uncomfortable emotional truths rather than simply decorating their walls with pleasant abstractions. I spent 9 months developing my artistic language, working with mentors who pushed me beyond technical proficiency into genuine innovation. Every critique I received, every workshop I attended, every exhibition I visited, all of it was preparation for creating work that would finally express the vision I'd been struggling to articulate for years. When I finally emerged from the cocoon of the residency, it wasn't as Emma the disappointment. It was as Emma Prescott, artist, selected for the Berlin Biennale, creator of work that commanded attention and refused to be ignored. The transformation wasn't just in my art, it was in everything about me. The way I carried myself, the clarity with which I could discuss my work, the confidence I felt in my artistic decisions. "You've become the artist you were meant to be," Julian told me after my Biennale installation was complete. "Now it's time for the world to see what your family couldn't." The night before the Biennale opened, I stood alone in the massive exhibition hall, looking at my 3 canvases illuminated by spotlights. Fracture in Blue dominated the central wall, a 6-foot exploration of human vulnerability rendered in shades of cerulean and cobalt, with gold leaf highlighting the broken spaces where light could enter. Flanking it were Resonance and Threshold, companion pieces that continued the visual conversation about brokenness and healing. I thought about my family's brunch a year earlier, about Vanessa's dismissive comments and my mother's casual cruelty. I thought about all the times they had looked at my work and seen only what it wasn't, rather than what it was becoming. I thought about the check for $50,000 that had funded my sister's gallery expansion while I was told my work wasn't worth investing in. And then I let it all go. This moment wasn't about them, it was about the work. Honest, uncompromising, and finally complete. The Biennale opening exceeded every expectation. Critics praised my emotional fearlessness and technical innovation. Collectors circled like elegant sharks, eager to acquire pieces that were already being described as transformative and career-defining. By midnight, all 3 works had sold. Fracture in Blue to Elise Montgomery for €180,000, the other 2 for similarly stunning sums. In the weeks that followed, my name appeared in publications I'd once studied reverently in art school. My inbox filled with interview requests and invitations to speak at prestigious institutions. Galleries from London to Tokyo expressed interest in showing my work. The commercial success was validating, but what moved me most deeply were the messages from viewers who had been profoundly affected by my paintings. "Your work made me weep," one woman wrote. "I've never seen my own experience of grief expressed so perfectly on canvas. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone in these feelings." Another message came from an art therapy program director. "We brought our trauma recovery group to see your installation. Your visual language of brokenness and restoration sparked the most meaningful discussion we've had in months. Would you consider visiting our program to discuss your process?" These responses confirmed what I had always believed, but had begun to doubt under my family's persistent criticism, that art mattered most when it connected authentically with human experience, not when it merely matched someone's furniture or appreciated in value. 6 months after the Biennale, as Julian and I prepared for my first major solo exhibition at Labyrinth's New York Gallery, he raised the question I'd been avoiding. "Your family," he said, studying my newest canvas with a critical eye. "They must know about your success by now. The art world isn't that large, and the Prescott name carries weight." I continued applying a delicate layer of gold leaf to the canvas edge, focusing on the precise placement rather than the emotions his question stirred. "If they know, they haven't acknowledged it." Julian was silent for a moment. "That seems difficult to believe. You've been featured in every major art publication. Your work is selling for 6 figures. Collectors are commissioning pieces a year in advance." I set down my tools and turned to face him. "You don't understand my family, Julian. Acknowledging my success would mean admitting they were wrong. They would rather pretend it isn't happening than face that reality." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we should make it impossible for them to ignore." "What do you mean?" "Prescott Gallery is influential in New York. Your sister has built it into a significant commercial presence. What if we approached them to host your American debut?" I stared at him. "You want my sister's gallery to show my work? After everything they said? After how they treated me? I want the world to see that your work belongs anywhere, even in the spaces that once rejected it." Julian leaned forward, intensity in his gaze. "Think about it, Emma. Your triumphant return, on your terms. The complete artistic vindication." The thought created a complicated tangle of emotions. Vindication mixed with anxiety, satisfaction with dread. To stand in that gallery not as the family disappointment, but as a celebrated artist whose work commanded respect and admiration. The symmetry was undeniably appealing. "They would never agree to show my work," I said finally. "Not if they knew it was mine." Julian smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Then perhaps we don't tell them." Not until it's too late to back out. The plan we devised was elegant in its simplicity. Julian would approach Prescott Gallery not as my representative, but as the director of Labyrinth Gallery, offering a partnership to host the American debut of the Berlin sensation, whose work had commanded record prices at the Biennale. The artist's identity would remain confidential until the opening night, a strategy that was unusual but not unheard of in the art world, particularly for debut exhibitions where mystery could generate valuable publicity. The proposal would include impressive financial projections based on my European sales, critical responses that would flatter any gallery's artistic judgment, and terms generous enough to make refusal virtually impossible from a business perspective. Vanessa, ever the shrewd businesswoman, would be unable to resist such an opportunity, especially if she believed she was discovering an important new artist before her competitors. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Julian asked when the proposal was complete. "It will be emotionally complicated." I thought about the years I had spent doubting myself because of my family's criticism, the nights I had cried over canvases they'd dismissed, the slow erosion of confidence that had nearly destroyed my artistic voice. "I'm sure," I said. "It's not about revenge, it's about closing a circle, about standing in that space as the artist I've become, not the failure they believed I was." Julian sent the proposal the next day. Vanessa's response came within hours, eager, enthusiastic, already planning how Prescott Gallery would position itself as the discoverer of this extraordinary new talent. The contract was signed within a week, with specific clauses guaranteeing the artist's anonymity until the exhibition opening. My sister had just agreed to showcase my work as the centerpiece of her fall season, without having any idea she was doing so. The months of preparation were both exhausting and exhilarating. Creating new work for the exhibition while maintaining the secrecy around my identity required careful coordination and absolute discretion. Julian handled all communications with Prescott Gallery, insisting that the artist's privacy was paramount until the opening. I worked in a temporary studio in Brooklyn, producing 7 new large-scale works that built upon the success of the Biennale series, while pushing into new emotional territory. As the opening approached, anticipation in the art world built to a fever pitch. The mysterious Berlin sensation was the subject of intense speculation. Critics who had seen my work in Germany published tantalizing previews. Collectors placed blind bids on pieces they hadn't yet seen. The exclusivity and mystery had created exactly the kind of buzz that Vanessa's commercial instincts would appreciate, though for entirely different reasons than she imagined. 3 days before the opening, Julian supervised the installation at Prescott Gallery. I remained in Brooklyn, both to maintain the secrecy and to protect myself from the emotional complexity of seeing my work hung in the space where I had once been told I didn't belong. Julian sent photos of the installation progress, each image more surreal than the last. My canvases illuminated by the gallery's sophisticated lighting system, my name temporarily obscured on placards that would be revealed on opening night, my artistic vision filling the space that had once rejected it. "It looks incredible," Julian texted after the installation was complete. "Your sister personally oversaw the hanging. She's calling it the most important exhibition Prescott Gallery has ever hosted. She has no idea it's yours." I sat in my Brooklyn apartment staring at the photos, trying to process the complex emotions they stirred. There was vindication, certainly, but also a surprising sadness. What did it say about my family that they could recognize the value of my work only when they didn't know it was mine? What kind of love was conditional on success rather than understanding? The night before the opening, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, rehearsing what I might say when my identity was revealed, imagining the expressions on my family's faces, wondering if this confrontation would bring healing or merely deepen the divide between us. By dawn, I had reached a kind of calm resignation. Whatever happened at the gallery opening, it would be a culmination of my artistic journey, not an end, but a significant milestone. I spent the day in careful preparation. A skilled makeup artist arrived at noon to help create the polished, confident appearance I wanted to present. A stylist brought several gown options, and we selected a structured black dress with architectural elements that echoed the geometric patterns in my newest works. By late afternoon, as I studied my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, not because of the elegant styling, but because of the self-assured woman who looked back at me. This wasn't the Emma who had fled to Berlin with wounded pride and stubborn determination. This was Emma Prescott, artist, about to confront the people who had once dismissed her as worthless, not with anger or resentment, but with irrefutable evidence of her artistic vision and success. Julian arrived at 6 to escort me to the gallery. He looked elegant in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, studying my face for signs of doubt. I took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "I've been ready for this my entire life." The car ride to Prescott Gallery passed in contemplative silence. As we approached the familiar building in Chelsea, its facade illuminated by spotlights highlighting massive banners announcing the exhibition, my heart began to race. Through the gallery windows, I could see the space already filling with New York's art elite, champagne flutes glinting in the sophisticated lighting, eyes turned toward my canvases with expressions of admiration and wonder. Julian squeezed my hand. "Remember, you don't have to say anything to them if you don't want to. Your work speaks for itself." I nodded, gathering my courage as the car pulled to a stop. "Let's make an entrance they won't forget." We timed our arrival for maximum impact, 30 minutes after the official opening, when the gallery would be full, but before Julian's planned revelation of my identity. As we stepped through the doors, the bustling energy of the crowd washed over us. No one paid particular attention to our entrance. All eyes were on the artwork dominating the walls. My artwork, my vision, my triumph. I moved through the space with Julian, observing the reactions, listening to the conversations swirling around each piece. Critics gesticulated enthusiastically before Emergence in Amber, a new work I'd completed just weeks earlier. Collectors huddled in corners with gallery assistants, presumably discussing acquisition possibilities. Photographers captured the scene for tomorrow's arts pages. And there, in the center of it all, was my sister Vanessa, resplendent in designer couture, holding court among a circle of admirers. She was gesturing toward my largest canvas, her expression animated with pride and excitement. "The moment I saw this collection," she was saying loudly enough for those around her to hear, "I knew Prescott Gallery had to represent it. It's exactly the kind of groundbreaking work we pride ourselves on discovering." The irony was almost painful in its perfection. I caught Julian's eye, and he raised an eyebrow in silent question. "Ready?" I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I was certain those nearest me must hear it. Julian squeezed my hand once more, then moved smoothly to the small platform that had been set up for announcements. A gallery assistant handed him a microphone, and the crowd gradually quieted as they noticed him preparing to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian began, his voice carrying clearly through the now hushed gallery, "on behalf of Labyrinth Gallery, I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate this extraordinary exhibition. As you know, we've maintained the artist's anonymity until this moment, creating what I believe is the most anticipated reveal in recent art world memory." The crowd murmured in anticipation, eyes scanning the room, trying to identify who among them might be the mysterious creator. I stood perfectly still, my gaze fixed on my sister, whose expression was a mixture of excitement and proprietary pride. "It gives me immense pleasure," Julian continued, "to introduce you to the artist whose work has captivated critics and collectors across Europe, whose Biennale installations sold for record prices, and whose American debut you are witnessing tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emma Prescott." The silence was immediate and absolute, broken only by the sound of my sister's champagne glass shattering on the polished concrete floor. Every eye in the gallery turned toward me as Julian's announcement echoed through the suddenly silent space. I stepped forward, the spotlight finding me as if by magnetic attraction. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my steps were steady, my chin high, my gaze fixed directly on my sister's shocked face. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the hushed room. "And thank you all for coming tonight." The silence shattered into a cacophony of whispers and exclamations. Camera flashes erupted around me. I could hear the murmured repetition of my name spreading through the crowd like ripples in water. "Emma Prescott? Eleanor Prescott's daughter? The same family as Vanessa Prescott? I thought she wasn't a serious artist. I climbed the 3 steps to the platform where Julian stood, accepting the microphone from his hand with a grateful nod. From this elevated position, I could see the entire gallery, my work illuminating the walls. The crowd's faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from shock to admiration, and in the center of it all, my sister, frozen in place, surrounded by the shards of her broken champagne glass. I began this series, I said, gesturing to the canvases that surrounded us, as an exploration of vulnerability and resilience, about how we break and how we heal, about the light that can only enter through the places where we've been cracked open. My gaze moved deliberately to my mother, who stood near the entrance, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. I created these works during a year of transformation, I continued, a year when I discovered that sometimes rejection is merely redirection. Sometimes the voices that tell us we aren't enough are precisely the voices we need to leave behind to become who we're meant to be. A smattering of applause began, building quickly into enthusiastic approval. I held up a hand, not yet finished. I want to thank Labyrinth Gallery and Julian Meyer for believing in my vision and giving me the space to develop it fully. And I want to thank Prescott Gallery, I paused, my eyes finding Vanessa's again, for recognizing the value of my work when it was presented on its own merits. The implications of my statement rippled through the room. Art world insiders who knew my family history immediately understood the delicious irony of the situation. Vanessa had unwittingly championed the very artist she had once dismissed, proving that her rejection had been based not on artistic merit, but on personal bias. As I stepped down from the platform, the crowd surged around me, critics seeking quotes, collectors angling for private viewings, photographers requesting posed shots beside my work. I navigated the attention with a grace I hadn't known I possessed, accepting congratulations and deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. Through gaps in the crowd, I caught glimpses of my family's reactions. My father stood rigid near the bar, his expression unreadable. My mother had moved to a corner, visibly struggling to process what was happening. And Vanessa had disappeared, likely retreating to her office to deal with the public relations implications of this unexpected revelation. Julian appeared at my elbow, smoothly inserting himself between me and an increasingly insistent collector. "There's someone from the Times who'd like a statement," he murmured, "and Elise Montgomery is here. She wants to discuss commissioning a companion piece to Fracture in Blue." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. I found myself discussing my technique with curators I had once studied in art school, accepting cards from gallery owners who had previously ignored my portfolio submissions, and watching as the small red sold dots appeared beside each of my works. By 10 o'clock, every piece in the exhibition had sold, with the largest commanding $525,000, more than 10 times the amount my mother had given Vanessa for her gallery expansion, the same amount I had been denied for my studio rental. The symmetry was almost too perfect. As the crowd began to thin, Julian touched my arm gently. "Your sister is in her office. She's asking to speak with you." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was the confrontation I had both dreaded and anticipated. "I'll be right there," I told him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I found Vanessa behind her massive desk, the sleek modern office a stark contrast to the warmth of the gallery space. She looked up as I entered, her makeup slightly smudged, her composed facade showing cracks for the first time in years. "You orchestrated all of this," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "You deliberately humiliated me in front of the entire New York art world." I closed the door behind me and took the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. "No, Vanessa. You humiliated yourself when you dismissed my work for years and then championed it when you didn't know it was mine." Her fingers tightened around the pen she was holding. "You tricked me into showing your work. I offered you an extraordinary business opportunity, which you accepted because the work merited it. I countered. The fact that you didn't know the artist was me only proves my point. When you judged the work on its own merits, without the filter of your preconceptions about me, you recognized its value." "This is about that family brunch, isn't it?" Her voice was bitter. One critical comment, and you disappear for a year, then return with this. This spectacle of revenge. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. This was never about revenge, Vanessa. It was about reclaiming my voice. It was about proving to myself that my artistic vision had value, regardless of what my family thought. By humiliating me. By succeeding despite you. I softened my tone slightly. Do you remember what you said that day? That I wasn't cut out for this kind of work? That I was too emotional? That my art was uncommercial and unmarketable? She looked away, uncomfortable with the reminder. Tonight, I continued, you told everyone who would listen that my work is groundbreaking and exactly the kind of art Prescott Gallery prides itself on discovering. So which is it, Vanessa? Am I unmarketable or am I groundbreaking? Or does it simply depend on whether you know the work is mine? The silence between us stretched taut, filled with years of competition and misunderstanding. Finally, Vanessa sighed, setting down her pen and rubbing her temples. You've made your point, Emma. Congratulations on your success. The exhibition is sold out, your career is launched, and you've thoroughly proven me wrong. What happens now? Do you take your triumph and leave, never to speak to your family again? It was a fair question, one I hadn't fully answered for myself. What did I want from this moment beyond vindication? Was there anything to salvage from the wreckage of our relationship? I don't know, I admitted. I didn't plan beyond tonight. Vanessa looked surprised at my honesty. She studied me for a long moment, then asked, was Berlin really that transformative? Or did you always have this in you? The question caught me off guard with its genuine curiosity. Both, I said after considering it. The talent was always there. But Berlin gave me something our family never did. Permission to fail, to experiment, to follow my own artistic voice without constant criticism. She winced slightly at that, but didn't interrupt. In Berlin, I was surrounded by people who valued authenticity over commercial appeal, who encouraged risk-taking rather than safe choices, who saw vulnerability as strength rather than weakness. I gestured toward the gallery beyond her office walls. The work out there exists because I finally stopped trying to create art that would please our family and started creating art that expressed my truth. Vanessa was silent for so long, I thought our conversation might be over. Then, unexpectedly, she opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a folder. I found this last month, she said, sliding it across the desk toward me. I was cleaning out storage boxes from our old shared studio space. I opened the folder cautiously. Inside was a collection of sketches I had made years ago, early explorations of the themes that would eventually become my Vulnerabilities series. Studies in blue and gold, fractured forms reaching toward each other across divided spaces. The first tentative explorations of the visual language I had now mastered. These are from college, I said, surprised she had kept them. Before I dropped out. Vanessa nodded. I've had them for years. I look at them sometimes and wonder what happened to that fearless young artist who created them. You happened, I said, the words escaping before I could soften them. You and Mom and Dad. Your constant criticism happened. She flinched, but didn't deny it. We were wrong, she said quietly. Or at least, I was. I didn't understand what you were trying to do with your work. I thought you were being deliberately obscure, deliberately uncommercial. I didn't see that you were creating something genuinely new. The admission stunned me into silence. In all our years of artistic rivalry, Vanessa had never once acknowledged that I might have a valid artistic perspective different from her own. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued, but I am asking if there's room for a different relationship between us going forward. One based on mutual respect as artists. I don't know, I said honestly. A lot of damage has been done. Yes, she agreed, but damage can be repaired. Isn't that what your entire exhibition is about? The beauty in broken things that have been made whole again? The echo of my own artistic statement coming back to me from my sister's lips was jarring. Had she actually engaged with the meaning of my work, not just its commercial potential? A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Julian poked his head in, his expression concerned. "Sorry to interrupt, but Emma, there's a collector from Paris who's insistent on speaking with you before he leaves." "I'll be right there," I told him, gathering myself. As Julian withdrew, I turned back to Vanessa. "We should continue this conversation another time." She nodded, then hesitated before adding, "The New York Museum of Modern Art curator was asking about a possible acquisition for their permanent collection. I took the liberty of giving him your contact information. Through Julian, of course." I paused at the door, surprised by this unexpected professional courtesy. "Thank you." "It's good work, Emma," she said simply. "It deserves to be seen." When I returned to the gallery, I found it nearly empty, just a few lingering art critics and the staff beginning the cleanup process. Julian approached with a triumphant smile. "Unqualified success," he announced. "Every piece sold, 3 museum acquisition inquiries, and you're trending on social media." The mysterious artist revealed as the estranged daughter of the gallery owner. It's the kind of story the art world loves. "And my family?" I asked, suddenly exhausted by the emotional complexity of the evening. "Your father left about an hour ago. Your mother is still here." She's been standing in front of resonance for at least 45 minutes. I followed his gaze to where my mother stood, alone and still, before one of my most personal works, a canvas exploring the complicated resonance between mothers and daughters, the ways in which we echo each other even in our differences. "Do you want to speak with her?" Julian asked gently. I hesitated, then nodded. I should. As I approached, my mother didn't turn, though she must have heard my footsteps. Her gaze remained fixed on the canvas, her expression thoughtful and sad. "This is about us, isn't it?" she asked when I stood beside her. Mother and daughter, connected but separated. I was surprised by her perceptiveness. "Yes. It's beautiful," she said softly. "Painful, but beautiful." We stood in silence for a moment, both looking at the painting rather than at each other. "I didn't see it," she finally said. "All these years I didn't see what you were trying to create." "You weren't looking," I replied, without accusation, simply stating a truth we both knew. "You were too busy comparing me to Vanessa, measuring me against your expectations instead of seeing what I was actually offering." She nodded, accepting this. "I'm sorry, Emma." 2 simple words, yet they hung in the air between us, weighty with years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. Not enough to heal everything, but perhaps enough to begin. "I'd like to see your studio sometime," she said hesitantly. "If you'd be willing to show me where you work now." It was a small request, a tentative reaching across the divide between us. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a first step towards something new. "I'd like that," I said. 3 months after the Prescott Gallery exhibition, my life had transformed beyond recognition. The critical and commercial success of the show had catapulted me into the upper echelons of the contemporary art world. I had moved into a spacious studio in Tribeca, accepted a visiting artist position at my former art school, and begun work on a new series exploring themes of reconciliation and renewed understanding. My relationship with my family remained complicated. Too much history to simply erase, too much hurt to fully heal overnight, but small steps were being taken. My mother had visited my studio twice, asking thoughtful questions about my process and listening attentively to my explanations. My father, more reserved in his approach, had sent a handwritten note acknowledging the quality of my work and expressing pride in my success. Vanessa and I had established a cautious professional relationship. She had recommended me for a major commission, and I had suggested one of her emerging artists for a group show curated by Julian. We weren't friends exactly, but we were finding a way to exist in the same art world without the destructive competition that had characterized our earlier relationship. The most profound transformation, however, was internal. I no longer measured my artistic worth by my family's approval. I no longer doubted the validity of my creative vision. I no longer hesitated to claim my space in the art world that had once seemed so inaccessible. On a crisp fall afternoon, I stood in the Modern Art Museum, where my painting Fracture in Blue had been installed in the contemporary collection. Visitors moved slowly through the gallery, pausing before my work, some taking photos, others simply standing in contemplation. A young woman in her early 20s lingered longer than most, her sketchbook open, her pencil moving across the page as she studied my technique. I recognized something in her intensity, in the way she leaned toward the canvas as if trying to absorb its essence through proximity. "Are you an artist?" I asked, moving to stand beside her. She looked up, startled, then nodded. "Trying to be. Everyone says my work is too emotional, too raw. Not commercial enough." I smiled, remembering those exact criticisms from my own past. "Can I see?" Quote. She hesitated, then turned her sketchbook toward me. The pages were filled with bold, expressive drawings. Unrefined, perhaps, but vibrating with authentic feeling and original vision. "These are remarkable," I told her honestly. "Don't let anyone convince you to make your work smaller, or safer, or more commercial. The world doesn't need more decorative art. It needs honest voices like yours." She blinked in surprise, then studied my face more carefully. "You're Emma Prescott," she realized suddenly. "This is your painting. I read about your exhibition at Prescott Gallery, how you proved your family wrong about your work." I nodded, thinking how simplified the story became in its retelling: triumph over rejection, vindication after dismissal. The messy, complicated reality of family dynamics and artistic struggle reduced to a neat narrative of success. "The truth is more complicated than what you read," I told her. "But here's what I've learned. Your artistic voice is too precious to surrender to other people's expectations, even when those people are the ones who should support you most." "But how do you keep believing in yourself when no one else does?" she asked, the vulnerability in her question revealing how deeply she had already been wounded by others' judgments. "You find the people who do believe in you," I said. "They exist, I promise. And you create, regardless of the criticism, because the work itself is what matters, not the approval, or the sales, or the validation." She considered this, then asked, "Would you look at more of my work sometime? Maybe give me some guidance?" "I'd be honored," I said, meaning it. "In fact, I'm starting a mentorship program at my studio next month. You should apply." Her eyes widened. "Really? You'd consider me?" "Absolutely. The art world needs authentic voices like yours." I took out a business card and wrote a personal note on the back before handing it to her. "Email me your portfolio. And remember, the people who tell you your work is too emotional or too raw are the ones who are afraid of what honest art can reveal." As she walked away, clutching my card like a talisman, I turned back to my painting on the museum wall. The culmination of a journey that had begun with rejection and ended with not just success, but something more valuable: the unshakable knowledge of my own artistic worth. The path from that family brunch where I'd been dismissed as worthless to this museum where my work now hung had not been easy or direct. It had required removing myself from toxic influences, finding mentors who believed in my vision, developing my technical skills to match my emotional ambitions, and most importantly, learning to trust my own creative instincts when everyone around me questioned them. But standing there, watching strangers connect with the most vulnerable parts of myself expressed on canvas, I knew with absolute certainty that every painful step had been necessary. Every criticism had strengthened my resolve. Every rejection had redirected me toward my true path. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "The Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago just confirmed your solo exhibition for next spring. We did it." I smiled, typing back, "I did it. But I couldn't have done it without you believing in me first." And that was perhaps the most important lesson of my journey, that while self-belief is essential, none of us succeed entirely alone. We all need at least one person who sees our potential when others miss it, who encourages our authentic voice when others try to silence it, who believes in our vision when even we begin to doubt. For me, that person had been Julian. For the young artist I had just met, perhaps I could be that person. The circle of creative encouragement, continuing, expanding, ensuring that other authentic voices would not be silenced by criticism or commercial considerations. As I left the museum that afternoon, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond professional success. The wounded young woman who had fled to Berlin seeking validation had returned as an artist secure in her vision and her value. The family that had once defined me by my failures now had to reconcile themselves to my success, on my terms, not theirs. My art had always been about finding beauty in brokenness, about how light enters through the cracks in our perfect facades. My life had become the embodiment of that artistic vision, damaged but healing, fractured but whole, transformed by the very breaking that had once threatened to destroy me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.